Greg Thompson, creator of SOCP, Inventor, what it's like training Special Forces soldiers how to fight. So I've just finished the show with Greg, absolute warrior gentleman. It's a two-parter, so strap in. Greg has trained special operations soldiers for over a decade now, trained federal and law enforcement for over 2 decades, and it was an absolute pleasure to have him on. The things he spoke about in regard to his martial arts background, in regards to special forces combatives, military combatives, what it takes to win the fight, what it takes when you're fighting for your life or someone else, and all the scenarios and training education he's gone through personally and with the other agencies was just phenomenal. From training people like Tim Kennedy, other famous, working alongside other famous UFC, MMA stars, to training the warriors that you will never hear of that do those things in order to for us to have a better life and for us to live the life we live. I just am honored to have had him on the show. Thank you to Dr. Mike Simpson for introducing us. Mike's show is coming out soon as well. But Greg, like I said before, creative SOCP, you can find that at socp.info. Check out the show notes on Insta, SOCP_solutions. Check that in the show notes. But I want to quickly run through his inventions as well, because he really is a multifaceted individual. So check this out. The SOCP sling pack, the SOCP insert, and then pairing with Benchmade, the USA knife company, he's invented the SOCP daggers. There's 3 versions there: the SOCP rescue tool, the SOCP folder, and a whole bunch of other things here that I'll list in the show notes as well, with links to. Again, Greg, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. Listeners, strap in. This guy is, like I said at the start, a warrior gentleman. I hope you love the show in 2 parts as much as I did interviewing him. Thank you so much for watching. Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight to a Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest today, Greg Thompson, all the way from the United States. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's absolute honor, and I haven't done shows in a while, so it's great to get on board with a compadre, I would suggest. For the people that don't know you, I've done the show notes prior to this, and I do them by video and audio. But you know, Greg, you're the creator of the Special Operations Combatives Program, better known as SOCP. You've been training elite special operations teams for such a long time, and we're going to get into your lineage, which is absolutely brilliant. You're working with Benchmade, which is so cool to see you make tools and make a whole bunch of different training innovations. But man, let's get into it. You train soldiers to fight, essentially. What got you started in this, man? Where did you kick off?
Well, I mean, like most people, I start off in traditional martial arts, or guys my age. You know, the younger guys today, they're fortunate that they get to jump right into MMA and jiu-jitsu and more well-rounded hand-to-hand systems. For me, it was traditional taekwondo and karate in the 70s and 80s. You know, I'm 55. You know, born in '68, so it was a different time frame. And if it wasn't local to you, you couldn't acquire the knowledge. You know, there was no YouTube, there was no, internet. You know, at that time there was no even cassettes. You know, be able to record something, so you had to go there and train. So the traditional martial artist was the local best knowledge that you had, and so I started down that route. And then I wrestled in junior high and high school. Played football, and I did, always did 3 sports every year from the time I was 9 years old. So I played American football, and that was really big in the town that I came up in. You know, football, American football was just the religion. You know,
It's like
so I
rugby in
enjoyed
my
that.
country.
Yeah, yeah. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. You know, I like the wrestling, but if you went to a wrestling match, you know, you may have 15 people in the stands, and then you'll go to a high school football game, and you could have 2 or 3,000 people
Wow.
there going nuts. Especially was, you know, a 4A school, which, you know, basically in my graduating class, we had right at 400 students in a senior class. So it's a pretty decent size school. Then I went and played football at Western Carolina University and did some wrestling and murals there. Through that period of time, I was always doing some kind of martial arts or training with my buddies, putting the gloves on or hitting heavy bag and things like that. And, you know, right after my senior in high school, I started doing a little bit of bouncing, you know.
Yeah.
And that really was that what was funny, not to get off the topic, but I was asked by a guy I worked out with who knew me from football and some of my wrestling accolades, and asked me, "Hey, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, right, was going to play at this pool. Uh, it's called Johnny B. Goods, and they had a pool outside. And he said, "Hey, this section over here, you don't have to, you know, you can't drink, and teenagers can go to this area, and she's going to be singing out at the pool. So we want, you know, just hang out there, and you know, you walk around and bounce and talk to people and keep the peace." And when she first started singing, I was on one side closest to the steps, and another bouncer was on the other steps, telling everybody, making sure nobody ran up on stage.
Yeah.
And at that time, you know, growing up, the Hell's Angels were pretty big group, and a lot of my friends that I grew up with, their parents were affiliated in different ways, so I kind of knew and kind of was around different type of mentality, you know, people. So when she started singing midway through, this biker walks up to the center, climbs up in the front of the stage, grabs her from behind, and he's doing just waving his hand, and these guys are way in the back screaming. And I looked at this other guy because I'm just out of high school.
Yeah.
I'm a senior, just graduated, summertime. You know, I looked over him like, "Hey, what are we gonna do?" And he looked at me and just shook his head like, "I'm not even getting up." And I'm like, "Well, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna have to do it." You know, so I walked up on stage and he moved her out of the way. And I remember he kind of looked at me, and I just did an arm drag and got behind him. You know, I didn't swing at him. I walked him right to the edge, you know, and just barely got him to the edge, and then just kind of pushed him off the edge of the stage he was at. So I thought, this is cool. You know what I mean? This is handled in a way that's not going to piss everybody off or
Yeah.
piss off the group. Well, as soon as he hits the ground, the manager runs up and punches it. He's not knowing who this guy is. I knew by he didn't have his flags on his back, but I knew by the faces of the guys that were there exactly who they were.
Yeah.
And when he hit this guy, I was like, "Holy crap, it's fixing to be on." So they started fighting, rolling around, and I put my foot between them and I grabbed this guy underneath the neck and pushed the other guy away and screamed at him to you know, leave this guy alone. I kind of turned my back so he wouldn't even hit him, but it put his arm behind his back. And then instead of walking him out to the front, there was their bus came in by the highway, which there was a huge fence. I walked him to that fence, opened it up, and pushed him out by the highway. And I locked the door and said, "Hey, if I take you that way, they're going to arrest you. You've got to walk around."
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, because I was not even being 18 years old, I knew I was not walking him by all those other people, and I'm not going to get in a mob fight, you know, if I do so. So I just pushed him out there, and the owner of the club saw me do that and said, "Hey, you know," later he came up, "Oh, you know, I want you working for me." I'm like, "Well, I'm 18 years old." And he goes, "I don't care. Don't drink. I want you in my bar. You know, I
Yeah.
want you bouncing. Just don't ever drink and don't tell anybody how old you are." So here I am. I was a bouncer that whole summer, but I learned a lot by watching drunk people and how they interact, and just keeping a common sense tactical understanding of what's going on, you know, at an early age. And then went on and, you know, to college, played some football, and then, you know, kept training and doing my thing there.
Greg, what I might do is pause you there because it wasn't a tangent, it wasn't off topic. Because really, we're talking about you teach people how to fight. Some of them are fighting for their lives, some of them are fighting to save other people's lives. And what a great experience. I'm not going to say story, what a great experience you put out there. It's interesting because your experience bouncing is the same as our instructor in New Zealand Special Forces and New Zealand Defence Force. I asked you about him earlier, Jeff Todd, and then also the same as Dwayne Dieter, watching not bouncing, but in bars with drunks, and he was an instructor for the SEALs a long time ago. Real world violence, which brings me to a question related to what you told me. And Michael Donvito from the ALEU was just saying this in an interview the other day. Knowing how to fight gives you confidence. Would you say that's a correct statement? Because you had trained in martial arts and wrestling, and I don't know what else, but did you have confidence at 18 that you could probably handle that and de-escalate, which you appeared to do?
Yeah, I mean, I had definite, confidence that you're always scared. You walk up on a stage with all these people, you're going to be scared. But I had enough confidence to step up and do it. But people need to really understand what is confidence. Are you fooling yourself because you really don't know the capabilities of the other person, or who else is with him, what tools does he have on him, and what is his mental escalation of force. See, there's some people that think there's going to be this back and forth, and you're going to see some people, you approach them wrong and say one thing, they're going to a pistol and they're just going to start shooting you, or they're going to swing at you, or they're going to go to an edge weapon or some other force multiplier. So you have to be smart and respectful of the situation. For me, and I bring up that is because you have to understand tactics in everything that we do. There's a tactical equation that's going on. And if you don't understand your strengths and weaknesses and don't assess the environment for what it is, I was not worried about that guy, because to me, well, I sort of was, but his mindset, he was partying, he was having a good time, he was a little out of shape, he was bigger than me, but I wasn't. I could just tell by his movement that he wasn't super athletic, but he was the demeanor being crazy enough to do whatever inside of the moment, like maybe pull something out. But I approached him with my hands up with a de-escalating manner.
Yep.
And then I just saw the way his posture kind of squared up, but it wasn't a posture of super violence. So I just arm dragged and got behind him where I could kind of manage his hands and just didn't throw him off the stage, walked him to the edge and just gave him a little bit of a controlled push so his feet could get underneath him.
Yeah.
And then went that route. And that's where a lot of people escalate stuff to, even watching other bounces where they would get way too aggressive. And I'm like, hey, it's not just that guy. He's got 3 or 4 buddies sitting over there and they're going to jump in, and most of the time I could see stuff and defuse them, or see these 2 guys not getting along. They're real crowded. There's another table on the other side of the whole place that just opened up. I could tell somebody, hold that table. Hey guys, there's another seat over here, because if they spend another hour and a half standing next to each other, stink eyeing each other and posturing, this whole place was going to go up, because there would be 4 or 5 of them. So, hey guys, why don't you come over here? Now they think I'm their best friend, right? And I've settled the whole thing. And depending on who it is, I may need their help, because sometimes I had bouncers that I couldn't trust to watch my back, but I would have friends that I grew up with that would party in that same bar, and I'd say, hey man, I'm going to have to throw this guy out. The guy next to this other bouncer's an old douchebag, watch my back. And I had 3 or 4 guys I grew up with that would be just kind of the gray man walking around. So I knew I was a little bit covered. But those are things you kind of, but the truth, you learn, but they're kind of things, if you grew up in a certain environment and you had common sense or you thought about it, you would handle it that way. You know what I mean? And a lot of it is just making people, give them a cheat book to thinking this way. I don't have all the answers by no means, but I try to think it out, and I surround myself with people. And then, like we've done with the SOCP program, and even prior to, before calling it SOCP, we were creating scenarios based on the feedback that we got.
Mm.
And then that's what we work from. And then whatever it takes for you to win that scenario that you're more likely statistically to run into. And then give them the TTPs to kind of integrate that into what they're doing. Now, granted, there's certain TTPs for CQB, so we have to integrate around that. But if it's a meeting gone bad, if you're fighting in around a vehicle, what is it that we're training guys to do inside of this curriculum that we have? And then just keep playing that get, that back and forth,
I'll come into the
off
tactical.
of it.
I'll come into the tactical stuff more as we go down, but just lastly, unpacking for the general person that heard your experience there growing up, and it was the question I was forming before you went into the bouncer experience at Joan Jett, which was awesome. Doing those sports, I say sports, martial arts, boxing. You said wrestling, and they start off as combative sports. Did doing those sports, did you get in many fights at school, or was that
I
did that give you
didn't. What was
skills?
funny, I did not get in any fights with my classmates because we all came together in at a younger age to where what if we all came together with two high schools merging, it would probably have been some fights. But people knew me through sports, and then usually if there was somebody I had a disagreement with, they were a little reluctant. Not I was not a very big guy. I
Mm,
wrestled 105 weight class in the ninth grade,
yeah,
but they also knew that I would probably fight about anybody if I could not talk my way out of it. That
yeah,
was. But I also was smart enough to have a lot of friends that were very capable as well and respected me too. So I think doing the sports through your whole time coming up, the most athletic people are your closest friends anyway. So
yeah,
when you're in high school or junior high, um, as well. So it wasn't that I was a tough guy. I was kind of balanced between a friendly guy and then being a fighter.
yeah.
So I guess in high school, this sounds kind of corny, but I was what they call Mr. Panther. So it was the homecoming king. So in doing that, being what's called the homecoming king or the Mr. Panther, you were more of a friendly guy, but you're an athletic guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
So that was
does.
more my mentality. And I've never said that in a podcast. Anybody, I'm going to get ragged to death for saying that. I'm not going to live that down. But we're talking about high school, and I'm drinking a lot of coffee right now. But um, but that was the time then where you were voted out by your peers. But it was because I had more of a friendly mentality with people. I didn't dislike anybody, and and it bothered me if I had an issue with somebody and it wasn't, if I felt like it wasn't worthwhile having a disagreement about, I would try to settle it, that way. And then going to college and stuff like that, I got more altercations though when I would go out with my friends. Um, Dozens, probably several dozen street fights because I'd be out with my friends and someone would come up and disrespect us, or I would get sucked into a fight because of my friends,
Yes,
right?
that was where this was
And
going,
that
isn't
where
it?
I
Your
learned
friends
even
start the
more.
fight.
My son, I'm like, hey, when your friends know that you're capable of it, they walk around with sometimes a little more, at a younger age, a little more cockier than they should be. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? And then they pull you into stuff,
yeah.
And I remember I got to an altercation. I had got an assault charge brought on me, but I was fighting two older guys, and I hit one first, and then another one jumped in, and I got the better of both of them. One went off into the hospital. And the cops came up, but that guy ended up assaulting or the police officer, and the other one had a record a mile long, but they wanted to press charges on me, so it all got thrown out. And I was like 18 at that time, but um those things would happen. I would look back and I was lucky I didn't get, stabbed. There wasn't as much shooting going on in the area that I was, but on occasionally guys my age were more, with knives or something like that or
Mm.
bats and things like that at that time. But it's progressed a lot more to shooting, back then. But I got lucky, anybody says, hey, I was the toughest guy yet. I was the luckiest guy. Let's just say that. I was lucky that things, you know, turned out you know, I never got seriously hurt, you know, in some of these things. But that's youth. You're so full of testosterone, and you know, people can push those buttons, and you're like, okay, then we're just gonna go. And as you get older, you know, you don't worry too much. But I think a lot of that psychologically. Now I've done enough things that I could walk away and not be pissed off. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? As when
yeah,
I was young, it's like, no, I'm gonna be mad for 5, 6 days if I walk away from this dude, or I'm gonna have to, you know, what settle it later. But those are different mindsets that are somewhat immature that I think we all carry, you know,
yeah.
when you look at the whole scheme of things. And it's somewhat of a strength and a weakness in itself. You know, it's a weakness, it's a strength because you'll step up when you really need to, but it also will suck you into a crappy shit sandwich that you may not be able to get out of, you know,
Yeah,
and you know, and there's the before, there's the during, and the after. You know, you may win, get sucked into the during the before, and there's the during the altercation that you win, but then there's the after that you end up going to jail, you end up being seriously injured, or you're injured enough that you can't do other things that are important to you, from sports to something else, you know, or legal fees, you
yeah.
know, that with
Yeah, look,
that.
the ego is a funny thing. You know, Tony Blair has literally trademarked "be your own bodyguard," but I love that you're saying, because I interviewed, and he's now a good friend, Gary Fahey. He was the head of the bodyguard team for the Australian Prime Minister, and his statement in one of the shows was, our job was to run and hide. Literally, you grab the prime minister, you grab the president, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to run and hide. It's not
Mm-hmm.
ego. It's completely different. But if you translate that to be your own bodyguard, that's the same thing. You know, I'm sure you teach, if you're teaching civilians, hey, if you can just walk away from that and they're still saying all these mean words about your manhood or about your woman, if you can walk away from it, you've won the fight. But there's that little bit inside of us that gets us in trouble as we're younger. But I think from our experience and our training, Greg, that we can impart that knowledge, hopefully, that someone can actually keep themselves safe from jail or from getting their head kicked in, or whatever happens. But it's in there. But I think it's important we make people realize that. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I think even for me, it's kind of when I get, if I get caught in a really shitty mood, I'm probably a little bit quicker to maybe not handle it the way that I know that I should. You know, um, especially driving, or going somewhere, people start acting real crazy. But I'm 55 now, you know, so I don't want to allow myself to get too worked up. But I think too, in the States, you always have to worry about people, you know, everybody's running around with some kind of tool, if not a firearm, you know, as
Yeah,
well.
I love that you call them tools. Man, you got 5 years ahead of me, my friend. That does push us on to, you're saying, you know, you're competitive MMA, competitive jiu-jitsu, and that's sort of where we're pushing on to from the college side. You're in that world. How does training
Well, what?
soldiers happen
Yeah,
from being
yeah.
competitive
Well, what
jiu-jitsu
happened?
guys?
Yeah, played at Western Carolina, and I went to a 3-year graduate program in industrial design product development at NC State. While I was there in '93, I watched the first UFC with Hoist, and I'm
Wow.
like, man, that's the missing link. That is, there's that little guy is getting after it. And because from my wrestling and my and the striking arts, Thai boxing that I did, a bigger guy, if he really just tucked his chin and decided, hey, you're not taking me down, and I'm just going to bang with you, you're going to have to not just be a little bit better, you have to be way better. And if he has just a good foundation of fighting, you're going to be in trouble, you know.
Mm.
So that really excited me. So I ended up buying the cassettes. You know, back then it was the cassettes that you could get, of the Gracie Basic and in action. You know, and went into it with some friends of mine, and made some copies for them and whatnot, and pass it around. So hopefully I won't get arrested for here. And these cassettes, because you didn't have the internet information you have now, so we would study it. And Tom Garner, he was a friend of mine. He owned the gym where we were doing some training in the aerobics room. We'd throw some mats down and we'd lift weights, and then we'd get in there and then get after it. And he knew a guy, Norm Hooten's dad. So I don't know if you're familiar with Norm Hooten. Um, the movie Black Hawk Down, This Is My Safety, that was the Hoot from the movie, but he knew his dad. And
Wow.
Norm and Paul Hines had been training with the Gracies prior to the UFC in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And so he's like, hey, I got this SF buddy that will come up and show us some stuff. And Norm was a white belt at the time, right? Baby weighed 175 pounds. You know, I'm 200 pounds. You know, set the school bench press record 405 with a pause. You know, in college and just slinging steel and wrestle. And I'm like, all right, you know, we're gonna roll around because I was kind of just forcing wrestling into certain jujitsu moves, like
Yeah.
not a clue. And I rolled around, and he was a white belt. And about 10 minutes into it, he caught me with a straight arm lock from the guard, and I'm like, this little guy. This little guy caught me in an armbar, you know, and I'm just inside. I wasn't mad. I was smiling. I'm going, all right, finally, there's something that I think works. There's something here. This is awesome. So he and I became good friends, and I would help him with Thai boxing and some wrestling, and he'd help me with the jujitsu, and that was in the early '90s. And then one of the unit that he was on, his team went to Orange, California, to train at the Gracie Academy. He invited me along with him, and so I had to take my own flight. I stayed at the same hotel as these guys, and kind of rode in with them to all the training, and kind of got special attention because I was with these guys by way of Horion.
Yeah.
But they knew I wasn't in the military. They just I was with Norm, and ended up getting my blue belt on that trip,
Wow.
which was surprising, my first trip out. But we were studying pretty hard. But I I had a lot more wrestling background, and I'd spent a lot more time, you know, dealing with people, you know, than the average guy that was there. You know, I
Yeah.
remember showing up, and they had some blue belts there, but they were not very physical, athletic people. So I guess I was relying a bit more on my athletic prowess, you know.
Yeah.
So I left with the blue belt, came back, opened up a Gracie Jiu Jitsu, you know, network.
Right.
And Norm Hooten and Paul Hines had the first one in the Carolinas. And it was in Paul Hines' wife's had a tanning salon, and they threw some mats out. And then they went pushing it too hard. It kind of fell to the wayside a little bit. And then I continued with mine. And then Norm would have me help him with his striking. And then there was actually one of the guys in one of the squadrons that we was in that did not like jujitsu. He was a really good kickboxer. They would have words back and forth, you
Yeah.
know, and what Norm was like, hey, you know, he called me up to, hey, I want you to help me train for a fight. I'm going, okay, well, who are you fighting? And oh, well, you know, and he kind of danced around, and it's like, I don't know when it, you know, I'm like, when is it gonna be? I don't know when is it gonna be, and I don't have a date yet, and haven't decided. So I would drive to Fort Bragg, and we'd meet at the regular inside the regular base. You know, I could not go into his unit, and we'd meet and we'd train, and I'd work with him on clinch against the striker and how to strike a little bit. And really, I was training him to answer the calling of another guy in his unit that was pounds heavier. That was a good kickboxer. Did a lot of spear. You know, so he was defending. Hey, that's all you need is kickboxing
Yeah.
and spear. If you go to the ground, you're not worthy of fighting. You know, and that was in the '90s. You know, and you know
Yeah.
my take even back then was you have to do it all because I was still running a Thai boxing gym and jujitsu. When I opened up my school back then, it was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but 2 nights a week we did Thai boxing,
Yeah.
and we were fighting MMA. You know, when it was illegal for a while in North Carolina. The third UFC was in North Carolina, and then they created the gladiator law. So we'd fight in barns, and we'd fight wherever in Virginia and Georgia and stuff like that. You wouldn't know who you were fighting. You just show up and fight somebody. They kind of, you know, weigh people and say, "Oh, you're about the same, you know, weight."
Wow.
But you know, we had inherent advantage. You know, if you were a purple belt, you know, in the '90s, you were a god. You know,
Yeah.
in on the East Coast for sure. And then with I would let the Duke wrestling team train for free. You know, at my gym. So we had a lot of really good collegiate wrestlers, and then we are doing a Thai boxing. So it really wasn't fair. I could train a really good athlete in 6 months, and he was just be vicious, you know. But I was working with Norm, and then he ended up going back and you know, one day in the mess hall, you know, the guy that hated jujitsu, he purposely brought up jujitsu, you know, and the guy was like, you know, saying something smart, and then Norm was like, okay, he took the bait. Well, let's go find out, you know, and in that, you know, I remember Norm saying, where should I fight him at? And I'm like, well, you need to, you know, should I fight him in an open area? I'm like, no, get the smallest space. And he was like, well, they have a small ring up in his squadron. I'm like, well, go there. So they went in there, and Norm ended up, I think, choking him out and getting the better of him. And it kind of helped pave the way for jujitsu, because he was such a smaller guy, didn't have the years of experience, you know. And what a lot of people don't realize behind the scenes, how certain things would happen, and then the word would get out, and then it would trickle down the Ranger
Yeah.
Regiment and other stuff. And Ranger Regiment had their own battles going on at the same time too, you know what I mean? And had their own guys coming out. And jiu-jitsu was one of those things that you could teach a novice, you know, a few things, and if that other guy didn't know how to deal with it, then they were going to be in trouble. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't a lot of things that you could really give somebody back then that really made so much of a difference. Now people learn from just watching fights and understanding body mechanics on the UFC and things like that. But it pushed it forward. But even, you know, then I never wanted to give up my ability to strike, my ability to do my Thai boxing. Time was priceless. My wrestling was priceless. And my jiu-jitsu, you know, I really jumped into that, you know, full speed. You know, when I got out of grad school, I worked for a company for 2 years as a designer. They patented several of my ideas, but I didn't like designing other people's stuff, and I hated sitting behind a desk. So after 2 years, I quit and opened up my own gym full time, and then started working with a unit in Bragg in '98, and then that gave me enough money to kind of keep the lights on, you
Yeah.
know. And then my wife's support, she was a doctor of pharmacy, so without that support, you know, I probably would have just grinded out my degree, because that's what I had. It was a degree in product development. But you know, did that for a while, floated back and forth, and then became a college professor at UNC, teaching women's self defense in a martial arts class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I created a curriculum. You know, I spent a lot of time developing a self defense curriculum for females, and then a martial arts class, and I was teaching them jujitsu, Muay Thai, for about a year. You know, it didn't pay nothing. It was just cool accolades to say I was a professor, but the amount of money I made, I mean, 12-year-old kid up the road cutting grass was probably making more money than I was, you know, with that job, you know. And then my gym wasn't making good money because we were all a bunch of meatheads beating each other up. And I couldn't understand why everybody didn't want to show up and just fight, you know, like we did. Um, but you learn how to run a gym properly. Then I was a terrible gym manager when looking back at it, but we had some great fighters. 9/11 kicked off, and then some of the guys that I knew from that unit were hired to train the air marshals. So they asked me to come and help revamp the combative program for the marshals right after 9/11. So 9/11 hit, and in January I was in Artesia, New Mexico, working there. And then that was when I made the biggest switch from fighting in a bar to MMA to tactical thinking, right? When
Yeah.
you really were forced to be there in the scenarios that we would run with these guys, and understanding the amount of time I had to train them, and understanding that these guys are, you know, you're lucky if 5 or 10% of them are ever going to do any martial arts training after what you give them. That
Exactly.
creates the POI. You know, what can I get that guy to do in this period of time that he's going to have to recreate 6 months, 6 years later when he least expects it? And that's what people need to understand. But doing that, and that was, you know, pistol and a knife. You know, it was a Spyderco knife at that time, and a Sig 365. You know, and then that was the tools that we worked with. So we'd be simulation training on aircraft, and I remember not liking some of the POI because I felt like we were in this open area, you know, learning stuff in an open mat room, and then you're in this little plane. And I remember saying, "Hey, you know, I taught them to let me and this collegiate wrestler and this purple belt in jiu-jitsu. We got on a plane for 2 days. Really, it was 2 half days because it was too hot. in Artesia, New Mexico in January to do anything past noon on an aircraft with no heat. Like you would literally be suffocating in there, you know.
Yeah.
So we'd get up early in the morning and we'd just beat the snot out of each other, creating PTPs for holding and ways to get up and maneuver, which it was a little can because it wasn't full of people too. You know, you start adding a plane full of people and doing stuff, but it was the closest we could get. So we started integrating a lot of that stuff into it. But what a lot of people don't know too is by the time March hit, they wanted a certain number of air marshals in the sky. So they're like saying, hey, it was all about numbers.
Yep.
So they cut our combative piece down and said, hey, you'll get it when you get back to your hub. So once you made it back to your hub, your home headquarters, wherever it was in Atlanta, Georgia, wherever it might be, where you're stationed, then they're going to train you more, which they never did. You know how that story goes. And then, so they came in one day and asked me and several other guys out of all these other instructors to stay on and become federal defensive tactics instructors. And I wasn't even a federal agent. So we went through the basic, FLETC, this is a pair of handcuffs type deal, and learning how to teach that, which is really good for me because it really made me a lot better defensive tactics instructor going through that, because they were learning that and then we would get them after the fact. But taking somebody that knows nothing about basic cuffing, prisoner handling, or anything was, it's important. I mean, how do you give a guy a weapon platform without telling him how to cuff somebody? When the guy does this, what are you going to do? So I remember having guys that were really high level SWAT guys going through there that had a lot of cuffing experience, and they would say, Greg, I don't like the cuffing that you're teaching. And I'm like, well, what do you like? I didn't know. I was, I'm not a cop, but I'm teaching you what they told me to teach. And I would say, hey, stay after and show me. And I looked at it like jujitsu. At that time, I was still heavily in the jujitsu. And I wanted to know every cuffing technique I could get my hands on. I just wanted to know how it worked, the leverage points, and it was just exciting to me. So I'd make these guys stay behind and show me what they liked. And then I said, okay, but you still need to know this to graduate. That's cool, And then that helped me expand my knowledge base quite a bit. And then all the scenarios that we would create, and seeing how people reacted differently in the scenarios than they were supposed to, or they may have known better, but they didn't react that way, And that's so important with scenarios, is because you can give them the techniques and they can tell you they're going to do this, but it doesn't mean under stress and in that moment they're going to actually react the way they know they need to. They just react instinctively in some other way, and you have to run enough scenarios to at least get them closer to the answer, under stress.
Greg,
So,
what I'll do is I'll interject there and unpack a few things that you've said, and we're pausing on that reaction under a scenario training situation, because there's a few things that are quite important as you tell your story. And a few times you said, and I'm not sure if you noticed, you've realized during this part of your journey that, hang on a sec, this person that I'm sending into a plane, this person that we'll probably get into it, is sending to go overseas after 9/11, is not going to be practicing in a dojo. Is not going to be practicing for years learning martial arts, is what you said. They're probably never going to do it again. And you've realized that you need to teach them something now that will work and they'll repeat under stress. Would that be a fair distinction? That's what.
Oh, absolutely. And my theory after developing the SOCP program, and even I still help other people, other units develop their own PTPs, right, for combatives. And I would often have units, call me up and go, Greg, come in and teach us some combatives, and they think I've just got their playbook for all their answers. And I always ask them, okay, what do you think's going to happen? What are your guys running into? What are the most common scenarios that you think they're going to see combatively? What has happened, right? And what and create 5 or 6 or 7 of them. We're going to create these scenarios, and then we're going to mix them together.
Yeah.
And then the POI is what it takes to win those scenarios. That becomes your POI. I don't have time enough to teach you the perfect mount escape, the perfect right cross. I have to see what tools are you showing up to that encounter with? What's your use of force in that, right? And everybody's use of force is going to be different. Even if you're what state or county or country, or law enforcement, military, you have to interject that, because that's going to be the line in the sand on when you may go. Now, you may decide to go sooner or later based on the threat in front of you, on what you're going to react. So then you take that and then you pick the best techniques for that person. You know, is it grandma coming out of the grocery store with her walker, right? Or is it a 4-man team on an assault that's a high level guys? You know, two
Exactly.
different combative situations, extremes. You know, grandma, she's got to be careful not to fall. You know, and my grandma just stick your hand in your purse, put that snub nose revolver in his gut, and just start firing. Don't even take it out of the purse.
Yeah,
I don't want
yeah,
his buddies around him to know where it's coming from. You know, when he drops, be careful, get off the edge, move quick with your walker, don't trip, you know what I mean, and get away, right?
yeah.
And that's about all you're going to expect grandma to do. You know, she's not going to do the perfect technique, you know, so you have to give her technique is just grabbing that pistol and getting away in her walker. You know, how long do you have to train grandma? Well, you may only have, you know, 4 or 5 hours to give her a tactical plan and then let her walk through that. But is that how the scenario is going to go down? Maybe not. You know, maybe she won't encounter somebody that way. Maybe it's going to be somebody knocking at her door or something like that. So you have to pick. Well, you know, we don't have enough time to solve all the problems, so we just have to go with, you know, the most common denominator. You know, what are tactics based on? You can't say I've got the perfect answer to clear this house. You're going on statistics.
Yes.
Statistically, it's safer if I approach this situation this way. You're just playing the odds. So you have to play the odds with everything else and then just kind of reverse engineer what it is that you're doing. I have no emotional attachments to nothing but the answer, you know,
Yeah.
and it'll really hit home with people when they realize it's not a game. You know, when you lose friends overseas that don't come back, it's a different animal. And I don't care what it takes to make him better. The
You got it.
race is to the answer, and the answer may always be changing. And I don't interject my, you know, I've been doing jujitsu now. You know, I've been a black belt for over 19 years under Horace Gracie. I do not inject too much of my jujitsu into them if I don't have enough time to do that. I say, this is what you can do right now. You know, is it Thai boxing? Is it wrestling? Is it get to that edge weapon, stab, touch the tonsils, throw the pot, push them off, and shoot them? That's going to
Okay.
work for you. But does that fit your use of force continuum? You know, that whatever it may be. You know,
Now,
and I don't want to. I'm just blabbing out too much on you there, but
no, no,
there's so many branches that these things go down, and it's hard to let people understand that, because they show up with their own mental baggage of how
yes,
things should be based on what they've seen or what they're focused on fighting. So before I teach you, you have to let them know, what are you really wanting to prepare yourself for?
yeah,
I can't assume that I know what that is. And it's always interesting to see what people say. You know, I don't teach civilians in the capacity that a lot of people do. SOCP is only for special operations units, law enforcement, military. And then when I do teach people, it's the jujitsu class. I still have a gym in Fayetteville, and it's more sustainment training for my guys. And we still do what I call a MMA striking class. We have a wrestling class, and we have a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu classes where you have the gi on, and I will. And sometimes they may not like it when the old guy shows up, you know, because I'm traveling so much. I'm maybe only there 3 or 4 times a month, but I will interject force multipliers in everything that I teach.
yeah,
Like, okay, you hold them here. This is going to prevent them from transitioning to a tool. If you get in this position, be cautious of this. Or here, you can then transition to a tool to engage his buddy, you know. But most of my guys being in Fort Bragg, you know, 70% of the guys in there are going to be law enforcement or military, primarily military. You know, Fort Bragg's the highest concentration of soldiers in the world. There's not a base in the world that has more soldiers on one spot than in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And if you don't believe it, Google it. You know, it's crazy. So it's packed. So my gym has all the pit bulls, you know, running around in it. So you know, they're also the kind of mentality that if you say something works, they're going to look at you and go, "Okay, show me." You know,
yeah.
whatever it might be, they're gonna want to see it work
They
before
want to
before they
question it
do it.
and
Yeah.
check the validity. What what that segues quite nicely into, we finished on scenario, and that takes us back to that, because you said you're not there to infer what need the client has, what need the unit has, but Where it's really proven is in scenarios. You know, you said about grandma, there's a scenario, but it might not play out like that. And this is probably the difference between sports, between your jiu-jitsu sparring, between your sparring in a ring and an actual violent, surprising encounter. Because when I pop, if we go to the special operations guys, when I pop around the door with my gun, I'm expecting to put bullets down. But when the guy's there, that scenario's changed. Or when it's a pregnant woman in front of whatever. Scenario training changes things. Again, Dwayne Dieter, he was well known for starting that. The scenario training just changed someone's brain. And police officers, police academy training, same thing. I saw a guy with a knife, and he actually just had a cell phone in his hand. Scenario training would have been a real shift for you. Is that where you started to develop the SOCP principles and so on from there, from what you saw?
Well, we did a lot with the air marshals, and I think that got me seeing and identifying that problem, running all the courses. When I left, when the air marshal stuff winded down, I was offered a position to help take over some of the training at the Atlanta hub. And I was this close to becoming an air marshal. I would have to fly for a year, but I was offered the best job ever in Fort Bragg, working with a unit there and to help out with the student cadre. So I was like, this is awesome. So I ended up switching from a couple hours, 3 days a week to 5 days a week, moving down there and living in that mat room. And then there, we were doing MMA, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, and then edge weapon work, and then a lot of scenarios that, certain units were already doing it. Now, we progressed the scenarios a lot of times, like some units still do today. There wasn't a lot of furniture in the room where they would come in and you would fight, and you'd be in a shoot house, and you'd have to watch out not to fall on something that would hurt you. So we'd have impact suits on. And then, I was a stunt man for them, being a role player for 15 years until my body couldn't handle it. And I have other guys that I bring in with me. But being a role player, you would see certain guys and the looks in their eyes. And none of those guys were ever like scared. It would be that sensory overload. You have your fight, flight, and then what I call freeze. And the freeze doesn't mean that he's scared. It means he's trying to process the answers that happen in front of him. And he's trying to come up with the right answer. Like, really, what do I do right here? Do I shoot this guy? Do I do this? Do I do that? And then the answer will change before he does the next move. You know what I mean? So you have to speed that up.
Yeah.
So you'll see that, and then you start to create stuff, and that was a big jump for the scenarios. And then for me is realizing that other units didn't have that skill set. So I would have another specialty unit would ask me to work with their guys, and I would see some issues there. And then getting feedback, I was told never to write anything down. So I never wrote down, because I wanted to create statistics of all the information that I was mentally gathering. And I couldn't write anything down, but I would keep mental notes. And, majority of all hand-to-hand incidents that happened, the 20 years that we were fighting, happened with cuffing, prisoner handling, and detaining. That was by far the majority. And that was the issue with a lot of the SF units. We did not have a standardized cuffing, prisoner handling methodology. Second was, upon entry into the room or around the corner. So, you're running with knives on, as soon as you boom in, and the squirters come running and run smack into you.
Yep.
If they're waiting on you to have a tool, they're going to be back in the corner engaging you with a handgun or a long gun in the corner of the room, or they're just going to grab you right there. And that was where I was seeing a lot of the altercations happen. So we would do drills to where guys would make entry, and we would be right there in front of, maybe we'd grab them, or maybe we'd just be right here with our hands up. So as soon as they came around the corner, they would just kind of freeze. And then you'd see the number 2 guy smack into him, because he's trying to figure out what to do with us, as opposed to having an answer for that linked to me even having a tool.
Yeah.
What would that be, and how would you handle that based on getting people into the room? You can't stay outside and freaking try to pie everything off forever, because what kind of walls? You've got thin walls. They're going to spray through that wall with an AK, and it's just going to blister everybody stacked up out there. So you got to, know to do some dynamic entry. You can't base everything on just pieing off, because it's not simunitions bouncing off that wall.
Yeah.
So people need to understand that, you know, on how you're doing, and if you're running with white light or nods, and how you're going to gauge them if you have nods on, you don't lose your nods, you know.
Yeah.
So that becomes a tactical change as well too, that people don't really realize. But with all that said, and then you were asked to answer the question about some of the SOCP stuff is the scenarios based stuff, pushed it out. But I also realized, you know, with this one unit I was training, that I knew it'd seen a lot of action. You know, this is probably around '06, and I've been developing the curriculum that we have now that wasn't called SOCP then for quite a while. And, you know, we were bringing in the best in the world. I could bring in, you know, from Dan and Santo to Randy Couture to Hoyce. They would, you know, we could bring them in and pick their brain, and then these people would leave. But when they left, all these people, anybody that was the best would leave. I would be left with guys going, okay, Greg, show me. And if I can't learn it in 5 days repetition to convey it to you, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
And also these guys, you know, if you've got a knife technique that's all great, and I'm going to show you this knife takeaway, they're going to go, okay, they'll grab a training knife and they'll just look at you and go, show me. And they're not going to pull punches. They're going to come after you. And so if you show something, it better work, and it should be that way. There should be no, just because I'm 55, if I tell you something, I don't want you to beat me up. I've got other guys you can beat up, but things should be questioned. You know what I mean? It should be validated. And things were validated. And I embraced that back then, you know, because I came at it from that fighter mentality. I've got to know it works. But when I was working with all these guys, and then I went to work with this one unit that had done a lot of this training, we were showing them a lot of cool stuff, and it was great. But we got to the cuffing side of it, and I realized these guys are like handling people terrible. Like, you know, and I was like, who in here has cuffed somebody? And everybody raised their hand. Okay, everybody had been overseas and cuffed somebody. Okay, who in here has had formal training? One guy raises his hand. And this is like 20 guys. He was a former MP. I'm like, okay, stop everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
We're going back to basic fundamental cuffing, prisoner handling, and not just out in a stagnant area, but on an assault. How are you going to cuff this guy on an assault? This guy's saying F you. He's moving around in the room. He's a open doorway with legs, right? So he's going to change the equation based on where he's at. The furniture in the room is going to change the way you're going to move, you know? So that's why I ended up designing a thing called combat cubes. They're like giant Velcro Legos, you know, 2 feet by 4 feet, 2 feet by 18 inches. And I can put them in any room, create any tactical environment. They fight, cuff around them. And then when they leave that room, I can move them all around and create a totally different combative feng shui, to where there may be a wall in front of them, a totally different dead space. There was just a door over here, but now I stacked up a wall. So now they have opposing threats. And now they're going to come to the same room they just went into, button hook locked down on that to reach to get the guy in the back of the room that's going F you, and he's gesturing like he might be doing something that's a concern. And if your use of force is an I can engage that adult male across the room because he's reaching where you will say your use of force isn't that. You know, I've got impact suits that I've designed here, and here's one of them here, has what we call face recognition on the front, Molly on it right here, hidden weapons on the front and the back. But I'll say, hey, look, that's your HVT right there. Look, this is the guy you're looking for. He's sitting back there doing. You don't want to shoot that guy.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna have to go over there and get this guy and reach your principal, and he's strung out on crack. You know what I mean? And he doesn't want to leave. You know, and he's got crazy hookers everywhere. You know, you got to go and get him and get off the X. You know, whatever it might be. But all these things, guys have to think and understand that and know how they're going to solve that problem, right? But the scenario-based stuff has to be there. It's like learning how to swim outside the pool. At some point, you're going to have to get in the water and swim, right? Yeah. And even more than that is your judgment decisions. That's the most viable thing you have, is the ability to make good judgment decisions. But if you don't have the experience in doing the task, how can you make a good decision under stress?
Exactly.
So figure out what those things are, and then run the scenarios over and over again. And then, you know, that'll get guys there a little bit quicker, you know. And that is kind of when I've started developing a lot more scenarios. And then over the years, you know, SOCP in 2010 became a program of record for all special forces. It is a credited course, just like the Army Combative program, the McMap program. for special operation units. And I didn't design the program. I'm a big supporter of the Army combative program because it teaches good baselines of fighting. Like this is how to escape the mount. This is a takedown. This is a right cross. All your fighting skill sets. But what we try to do with the SOCP is burn it from the other direction, right? Here's your tools. I've got to train a guy to become a SOCP instructor. I get guys for 2 weeks.
Yep.
I wish it was for more, you know, and but I'm limited with time, and they have to go back, and they may just have that elite guy for 40 hours.
Yep.
What am I going to train that guy to translate to make that guy survive the encounters that he's going to run into? You know, when we first started SOCP in 2010, the criteria was you must be a Sephardic graduate, which means you're a high-level CQB practitioner. Sephardic is in Fort Bragg, and it's the shooting school, assault school for basically Green Berets, right? It's become a standard for all basic special operations unit. Everybody must learn it that way, from the Navy counterpart. They're using that as like the baseline, right?
Brilliant.
But, and then you had to be an Army combative level 4 to become a SOCP instructor. They pushed it out, great support, had like 30 guys graduate, bad dudes. I mean, we crushed these guys, right? They're killers. And then I had a guy that summer called me up, Greg, I'm the new, you know, combative instructor for this special unit. And I'm like, well, are you an Army combative level 4? You know, are you a Sephardic? You know, was a Sephardic graduate, but he wasn't not even Army combative level 1. And I'm like, wow. Well, you're supposed to have this before you go through my course. Well, I don't have it. And then, you know, they're not going to stop the press. Nobody's going to stop doing what they're going to train their guys anyway. So basically, I end up having to get guys to say, look, at least you have your level 1. You have a strong understanding of CQB because tactics is a big part of SOCP. I have to, you know, I can teach you. I'm not qualified to teach anybody their tactics. I can't teach you tactical thinking, but for me to teach you tactical thinking, you need to have an understanding of basic tactics in general. It makes it a lot easier, right? So we get these guys, and it's adjusted the POI that we have, where we're always evolving based on what we can do to get the information out there to the key guys. So now it's a 2-week course. You know, in 2010, it was pretty much 90% assaulter based because that's what we were facing. Now we've adjusted the program where it's 50% CQB, 50% plainclothes, meeting on bad, that type of thing, because that's what guys are getting back to their own mission sets. You know, Green Berets were not originally door kickers, you know, they had a different mission set. So we have to touch on the baseline for that. But I want all those guys to become an Army combative level 1 or a McMap black belt or join a gym, you know, start doing jujitsu, MMA, start a club. That helps build the foundation for a lot of your skill sets. You know, it's the training aid. You know, you need physical bodies. You need to win or lose hundreds of times before you're 50% ready. You know, and I tell my guys in the classroom, I'm not becoming a SOCP instructor doesn't mean you're a badass. Doesn't mean you can fight. It means you can convey the information I need you to convey. You know, the main focus of our fighting is fighting in the clinch with kid on and fighting to retain or transition to your force multiplier. Around objects. I mean, not just the wall. People say the wall is nice because it's flat, you know. But you look in any room that you're in. Think about this: when you were a kid, you ever wrestle with your buddy when he came over to the house? Where would you wrestle your buddy at? Probably in the living room, right? You move the coffee table out of the way. How long did it take your mama to come running out of the kitchen, fussing at you for tackling over all the objects and bumping into everything? You couldn't do it, and you were trying not to. So where are you at? In a parking lot? You're in a bar? You're in a house? Where are you at? You know, you're going to be bouncing off of stuff. So you need to learn how to spin or redirect, win the clinch, to break contact or control head control, to be able to transition or retain your tools and winning scrambles over these objects, or winning scrambles inside the clinch.
It's never pretty, is it, Greg?
What's that?
It's never pretty.
No, it's never pretty. And you've got to have the experience. So what a lot of the drills will do is I'll set up the cubes and give guys pistols, and one guy clinches up with the other guy and say, hey, shoot him when you can. And they're all over the furniture, you know what I mean, and fighting over stuff. And trying to break contact. And when they learn to fight that way, they learn how to hold somebody, but they also learn how to break contact. You know, they learn that, hey, that one cube is the only cube you have to worry about. But if you pick a knee up at the wrong time and he spins you, he's going to put your butt over that cube and you're going to lose your leverage. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can go guard. How long is it going to take you to finish that fight? If his buddy's coming to jump in, you know what I mean? We show ways to transition to what's called a V grip and other things and fire from a compressed position and then clear the malfunction from there. But you're going down a rabbit hole of bad stuff. You usually can make maybe 2 mistakes. After that, it's just going to start to snowball.
Yep.
Yeah,
your mind's gone. You're at such a rate of speed. Look, Greg, just on that one, that gives me the perfect entrance, the perfect little notch to ask you the question that I wanted to ask going into this. Can you please explain, and you have through the whole interview, which is great, but can you succinctly explain the difference between martial arts, which is sports, and combatives? What is this fancy word, combatives? And, you and I speak the same language, but thinking about everybody else, what's the difference between those two things, martial arts and combatives, where you're fighting for your life?
And this is my interpretation. Everybody has their interpretation. Martial arts is very broad, just like combatives is very broad. Martial arts to me it can be an art form. So if I see a guy doing a kata, if I see a guy doing over exaggeration blade work that's really pretty and it looks good, is he needs to understand that he's venturing into the artistic side, and where that line is really based on who's he fighting, right? If he's fighting grandma with a butter knife and he's got a live blade, he can get as pretty as he wants. But if he gets another worthy athlete, his equal or better is what I call another worthy athlete, those over exaggerated movements can cost him. So he needs to refine that on what's really going to work force on force. You know what I mean? And the sportive aspect, you can go to Thai boxing, jiu-jitsu, combatives to me has to deal with more than just imano being empty-handed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In a store environment. So when you start to add multiple people, you start to add furniture or the concern of dead space, or the concern of somebody picking up or transitioning to a tool, there's a buddy kicking you in the back of the head.
Yeah.
That becomes a more integration of a different type of tactics, and that becomes more combative to me, and ventures into self-defense type mentality. Combative is often looked at more on the military side, so the use of force may shoot up a lot quicker than it would in some self-defense situations. But combatives is broad. It has to integrate into tactics for shooting, because you may engage that counter from I'm engaging with a long gun, clearing a room, to now I'm forced to go hands-on inside of a use of force, meaning that you don't want to hurt this person, or you choose not to hurt this person because for whatever reason. But however you grab them combatively has to link back to what your original tactics was. Where I've seen people make mistakes is from a martial arts standpoint, you may not be thinking about that dead space of the guy sitting on the couch that you can't see his hands. Combatively, when I snap this guy down, instead of holding them with my working hand, because it's more efficient and stronger to hold him with my dominant hand down, pin the head down, I'm here, is I'll switch hands, because I may have to transition to a pistol and shoot that guy. Although I have another guy in the room, he may be picking up on something else and may not see that guy making that quick transition to another tool. So you're constantly preparing yourself to think about so mmany more things that you may not see in the sportive aspect. Sportive aspect of jiu-jitsu, you're going to be catering to the rules of that particular engagement. Combatives have less rules to go by, so it's going to be more broad of that decision-making process. For me, when I did sport jiu-jitsu, I competed quite a bit, and when I first started losing the guys that I felt like I was better than, I started learning how to play the game. So I used time as a weapon. You get up on points, you realize, hey, there's 60 seconds left. I'm up by 3 points. I'm just going to hold this guy. That's not the true jiu-jitsu way of doing it. That's not the true combative way. Finish the guy. But you take that philosophy with you and you lose some matches. You're like, okay, I'm playing a game here.
Yeah.
We're not punching each other. I don't have to worry about his and pulling out a knife, or I hope he doesn't in the competition that we're doing here in front of everybody.
Yeah.
So you end up and I understand that. That's a tactical tool that I use is the clock, right? And then striking and everything else is that way. And I tell my guys, go box, do judo, do MMA, and understand tactically how to win that game. Just like the UFC, it's a bunch of 5-minute matches. It's 3 or 5 5-minute matches. You try to win that match, and then you try to win the other match, right, by points. Or if you can finish the guy, then you win everything. You trump them. But if you really look at it, that's how it's broken out. If you really want to win, you try to finish in that round, but you at least want to win that 5-minute encounter. And then I win the next 5-minute encounter. And then there's only 3. As long as I survive this one, then I can probably win the judge's decision.
I love what you said just earlier when you're explaining combatives. You explain martial arts and you explain combatives. You might be holding a guy down and then looking for the guy's sitting on his hands. And there was the now famous incident with 2 world level MMA fighters in a gas station, and ego got in the way again. This one of these MMA guys liked the look of one of these girls that was in there. Little be known, that girl and the other girl had 5 mates outside. And long story short, they're fine to fight in a ring. They're fine to fight 1-on-1, maybe even 2-on-1 to fight. But they forgot about the guy with the 2x4. No, the girl with the 2x4 smacking him in the back of the head and putting him in a coma for a month. And for me, that explains the difference between martial arts and combatives. These guys are world level MMA. Do not put me in a ring with them. I'll get killed. But put me in a house and things are a bit different.
Oh, no doubt. And a lot of them, they have the skills, these, high level fighters, and have the skills to do so much more. They limit their abilities because they were not aware or did not think about that inside the encounter. You know what I mean? I've trained lots of really good fighters. I was fortunate. I had Tim Kennedy train with me for 4.5 years before he went into the UFC. He was stationed in Fort Bragg.
Yep.
And several other really high level fighters that nobody will ever know. They're just, great assaulters, and a lot of times you'll find that they make really good decisions under stress because they're used to the stress of the fight. But once they dial into what the new game is that they're playing, they can do it real well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But a lot of it is just like taking a guy who could be a really good IPSC shooter. You know what I mean? But he's never cleared a house before. He's going to think he's going to do good, but he's just going to get just chewed up by people that he can outshoot all day. But once he starts to really get dialed into what he really needs to do, let's spend a couple of days tweaking this, he's going to do really well.
Yeah.
And that's where they fall into that combative side of it, and then also too, you'll see people, they carry a use of force. Their use of force was different. Their use of force mindset is different than their people that they're encountering, right? Yes. That girl use of force was totally different than his. Hers was, I'm going to pick up a 2x4 and crack you in the back of the head.
Yeah.
His use of force is, we're going to square up out here, and we're going to do this, the gentleman way. Well, that's not the arena that you're fighting in. You carried the rules to something that did not need to apply.
Exactly.
It's not, and so people have to make that switch. Sometimes they do it out of habit. Under stress, they divert back to what they're most comfortable doing. Yep. Or do they think about these encounters, and then address it that way?
Yep.
But only until they have the experience that they really start to make that switch.
Look, I'd like to tie that in a bow and push on to the cool things you've made, and I'll split the show when we ask the question combatives versus martial arts, because you've made some amazing things, especially partnering with Benchmade. But just want to finish up on that combative side. I teach World War II based skills. The things that Jeff Todd taught the New Zealand Defence Force and New Zealand Special Forces was based on a Fairbairn, Applegate, and so on. And those things just adapted to the modern environment of body armor and so on and so on. Where I think, and I would really like to get your opinion on this, there's a lot of SF guys So they're trained in violence. They're trained in experience to do that. They then go and do the sport, and they conflate the sport of jujitsu or whatever they're doing with being really good. But what I believe, they've bought the switch. They've already bought the switch. I can switch it on, as you said, with the ip six shooter. He knows how to pull a trigger. He doesn't know how to clear a house. They brought their combative mindset to a sport, and those combined is brilliant as you have. And then they'll then say, oh, jujitsu is great. Everybody should learn jujitsu because you can do these great things. Where in my mind, it's the mindset you bring that will so often win the day. I'd love to get your opinion on that short subject.
Yeah, well, my mindset is key. If you can't believe that you can do something, you probably won't be able to do it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So if you're gonna, fight or engage somebody, you need to believe that you can win. And I think that's what I like about some of the sportive aspect, of competition, is because you're forced to be out there by yourself. I don't know if I can beat this guy. And you overcome that and you build some kind of self-confidence, So it's
Mm.
a training tool, but it is not it's a tool, it's an aid. It's not the actual fight itself. And then mindset, you have to draw lines in the sand, from a combative perspective. I would tell guys like, look, you don't want to fight, you're scared, I'm scared, everybody can be nervous, but if you don't draw lines in the sand of when you're going to react, you're never going to react. And you have to mentally say, if he crosses this line, when I was younger, it's like, if he touches me, it's on. As
Yeah.
long as he doesn't touch me, it's good. And those were bad thoughts, but those were one that always stuck out in my mind, because there were guys I really did not want to fight. Like, I do not want to fight this guy, but if he grabs me, then I'm not going to just sit here and talk. It's on, and so having a decision and having the will and the belief. But that's one thing about will. You can believe and trick yourself. You have to have enough training to back up what
Yes.
you're doing. Does that make
Yes.
sense? So you
Absolutely.
have to train and have the experience to truly have confidence. Because I know a lot of stupid people that have a really crazy mindset, but they're just going to get themselves killed or hurt. It's the guy that has enough knowledge to have, hey, I know where this is going. It can go two or three different ways here. I'm gonna get on it and have the mindset, and I know I can push through. And I've seen really talented guys that I've trained in competition, over the years. My training fighters and jiu-jitsu practitioners, and even competing myself, and learning how to make that switch, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
visualizing it and willing it to happen. Can you will this to happen the way you want it to? And I remember there's some of my fighters that were not the best in the mat room. There's a female, Tara LaRose. I don't know if you ever heard of her. She was the first female Bodog champion before the UFC had female fighters. She was a fighter of mine, started training with me back in 2000. She was a lacrosse player that did some judo and then started training with me. But she wasn't the best in the mat room. But when she got in the cage, she willed stuff to happen. She willed to win. And I had a couple of fighters that were like that. And then I had some fighters that, if you showed up on a Saturday when everybody was just rolling around having a good time, he will trash everybody. But come day of competition, he would just not quite perform. And I
Yeah.
would catch myself slipping into that mindset of, you start doubting yourself. You moved up in high level guys. You're going against some of the best and toughest in the world. You're in the black belt division, or you're going against these different guys, and you're like, man, you don't not moving with the confidence and the belief, and then that can make you not do as well. You
Yeah.
know, so you have to visualize. I like to do a lot of visualizing and understanding of how this is going to go on, and not visualize to the sense that this is the only way it's going to go. But I see this happening. I'm going to will it to happen. I'm going to time it right, and I'm going to commit to it. But I always have that backdoor escape. Hey, if I miss it here and this happens, then I'm going to readjust, and then I'm going to go and win it this way.
Yeah.
And
That's
that gives you
brilliant.
the confidence to execute, and helps with the mindset from my perspective, from my experiences, which isn't the same for everybody. you
No,
know
it shows good comprehension and humility, and taking away the ego from the situation and worried about the outcome, which is to win. Um, so I can get this in, because it was such an integral part of what you do. Because I was thinking halfway through our interview so far, I actually watched some of your videos around about 5 years ago. So I can't, when I was looking at the Benchmade dagger, I can't believe I'm talking to the guy that I was watching on YouTube on a Benchmade video, you know?
I'm honored.
That's cool. You know, you're a creative guy, and you've shown that when you were saying, you know, we went into the airplane, sweated our asses off, almost overheated for 2 days to figure out what worked. So you're clearly a creative human, Greg. As so many SF guys are, but you've made all these things. You know, let's just start with your partnership with Benchmade. How you've got the dagger, the rescue tool, the folder, brilliant tools. What started that off? How did you partner with Benchmade? And so, last three questions, and then what's the tool you're most proud of that you invented?
Oh, very good question. Um, well, as far as the dagger goes, working with the air marshals, I figured some things out about tools. And then when I went back working with this unit and working with the student cadre, I would tell them to bring whatever edge weapon you had on your kit. I don't care what it is, wherever you want to put it. Get a trainer. You know, we would tap. You know, this was 2003, 2004. We were tackling guys in kit, getting them in position. You know, getting after them, and I'd say, hey, use your feet to create space, control the distance of their hand. If he's grabbing your handgun when you hit the ground, in the handgun down, your tool out, your knife out with your support hand, and and stab him. You know, I was going more for the subclavian or buried into the head as a handle. And I remember this athletic, you know, operator looked at me, and he's smarter than me, more athletic than me, and he's, you know, Greg, what do I do with my knife? Do I leave it in him? Do I
Yeah.
throw it on the ground? Do I resheath it? And this was something people would glaze over. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'm like, well, you know, that's a good question. You know, and then it, you know, I run things through the design process I learned in grad school, where I attack the problem over and over again, and I try not to have any emotional attachments and really figure things out. And it bothers me when I don't have a good answer. And so I kept thinking about it for a while, and you know, I ended up developing something first. A lot of people don't know it. It was called the rail tool, and it was a tool that fit on your rail guard, right, of your rifle. And
Yep.
you would click it, and you would use that to create space, and you could clear malfunction. And it was, you know, oh, you get tackled, you could do all these great things. And I really didn't think it out very well, you know, but I spent like $1,000 getting a 3D model made, and I showed it to these guys that I was working with, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." And then I thought, okay, let me run through these design questions that I have. Would you, you know, what would you pay for it? Okay, would you put it on your rifle right now? And then they looked at me and said, "No, I don't have enough space for that thing on my rifle." And I'm like, oh shit, you know. And then when we were fighting with it, you know, when a guy gets hit and tackled, he's not thinking about this. He's creating space, scrambling. It's like all these movements of reaching off stuff on your rifle and tapping it. You're barely going to hit safety. You're lucky if you get ambush tackled that
Yep.
you have the consciousness to click safety before you start to scramble. If not, you're going to be hanging on to your rifle too long. I thought, oh, that's a shitty idea, you know. And one thing I learned in grad school is, you know, once you realize something's a turd, you got to flush it. You know, too many designers, they design all this, they spent so much time and they paint this turd and make it look pretty. Like, it's a turd. You're not going to stop it. Flush it, start it. But what the unique thing that happened for me mentally was when I brought it back to the body, I did not look at it as a knife. I looked at it as a tool.
Yeah.
And I designed, when I originally did the original one here, okay, I'll grab one here. It has a sheath, and I designed the width of the sheath to fit the mop behind the molly.
Yep.
And then it clips. This is a newer clip here, right? And I wanted just the ring that you could hook your finger on and fit in the center of your chest. So whatever hand you pin your weapon system or manage them, this tool can come out, right? And with the skeletonized handle, once you created space here, you can transition to your force multiplier here, or your long gun, and or have a steadier shooting platform with either hand, or change magazines. It's not designed to say, I'm going to clear this house and I'm going to run around with my dagger. It happened because you were an old shit. You got this guy off of you. His buddy's coming at you with a machete, so you're clearing it and trying to shoot him. And as soon as you get a chance, you can resheath. And what's nice here, since it does sheath so high here, it stays. You're not having to snap it back down.
Yeah.
Too many of the guys in steel to this day, they'll have these handles, right? And they'll stick up and it gets caught under sling. It gets caught on everything that they're climbing around. Or us as trainers will reach out and grab that and start stabbing the guy with his own knife. And he's like, oh, it's a Kydex. I'm like, you're not going to be able to retain that inside of a fight. And people don't realize that. They see everybody running around with all this stuff on their kit. I'm like, hey, you've got to hang on to that stuff. That's mission specific. I'm not saying that that would be wrong. I'm saying if you're doing it from an assaulter perspective where you know you're going to be laying hands on people, it's not a smart thing. No. If you're in the woods or you're back somewhere and you're really in another environment where it's just better to have that big knife right there, you're cutting a lot of stuff, hey, that's great. But you have to retain that tool, you know?
Hey, so Greg, just on that one, because you probably haven't worked with our unit. A lot of the guys, when they originally ran leg holsters, and I went and transitioned to do a chest holster, a lot of the guys would put their Gerber dagger on that holster. I thought when you go through an airplane, everybody can see that leg, heads down, hands and seat in front of you. Anybody can literally see your leg. So I used to keep mine tucked under on my left hand, obviously my non-dominant hand, underneath my side panel, so no one could see it, but I could feel it straight away. And I've never been trained in we didn't train weapons back in 2005 like you do for clearing and so on. But I knew, don't let the bad guy see where the hell that thing is, because he's going to take it off you and do exactly what you said. So just want to reiterate your point there from an operator's point of view.
Absolutely. And really this was designed to fit between different pouches. So it laid really low where it was more concealed. Super lightweight, didn't take up much on your kit, because a lot of the guys, 15 years ago, plus years ago, they would sometimes just have little spider codes in their pocket. You know what I mean? They're like, they take off they just run with a plate. They're doing dynamic type stuff. Like, I don't want all that crap on me. I'm not surviving in the jungle. I need to move quick through these rooms here and maybe even rappel in or whatever it is they have to do. And they're not going to have all that stuff. So it needed to be lightweight. So this isn't although you can duel with it, this is not a knife designed you can knife fight with it, but that's not what it's here for. If I'm going to knife fight somebody, give me a sword, like I'll take it. Yeah. I want a Crocodile Dundee knife. You can relate, like, this is a knife, I want something big, but this is that small little tool that you're going to get out with either hand, but it's still in them. When I say touch the tonsil, stir the pot, push them off, get to that lead. Yeah. And if you scoop this out in any clinch, you go right underneath here. You're not going to hit any bone. Put in the back of the throat here. You're more than likely to hit the artery, but people won't bleed out quick enough. You can sever this artery right here, and he could still be floating around for 10 seconds or more. Now if he reaches up and realizes that he's cut, he may faint before he bleeds out. That's what people don't realize too. There's been a lot of videos out, and I've got over 300 knife assaults where I see people, they back up, they feel it, they look at it, and they drop. They really drop because they actually went into shock and the blood's coming out. But you really can't look at the volume of blood. They haven't lost enough blood to go unconscious yet. You got another 3 or 4 seconds. But even if it takes 6 or 7 seconds, how many people can you draw your firearm and shoot in 6 seconds?
I'm going to get to a reload.
So there you have it. But if you bury it into the tonsils and affect the windpipe right away, you are drowning now. You've got no air. Everything in your thought process is going to be, let me get, what is this? I have to deal with this first. Well, your throat's gone, and it's a checkmate. Now, switches and valves and all these things are important to know. But when you need to create that space, you've got to get to that windpipe and take that thing out, And I remember teaching this to one of my buddies, who's a SF guy, and we're talking about it. He goes, yeah, I used to work at a slaughterhouse, he said, when he was young, and they would literally hang these cows upside down. It's very terrible what they would do to them. They hang them upside down, and they would stab them in the throat. And as they go by, they were acting fine. They're just bleeding out. They get poked in the neck. The blood's rushing out of them, right? And he said, yeah, one day I accidentally went to stab one in the throat, and I hit his windpipe by accident. And everybody got mad at me because the cow then all the way down the whole conveyor belt was thrashing. Why? because it went in, it shut his airway off. All the blood was flowing into his throat, and the only thing he could think about was he's choking right now.
Yeah.
And so your targeting is very important based on what you're trying to do. You know what I mean? So it caters to that. Now, in carrying the dagger too, we switched over to a lot of our low vis stuff. So we'll carry an appendix carry above the waistline or below the waistline, slightly tilted so it's right at the crease of the hip, not straight down, but at an angle. And then that way we have a leather back plate for that as well, so it doesn't dig into you, right? And it doesn't print. So you have your handgun and you have that on one side. So that way you can scoop it out, do the same thing. Then you can do below the waistline carry, where if I'm running with board shorts or anything, and on our Instagram, I actually show a clip of me hiding it with some swimming trunks, actually 2 daggers. But you would clip on the here with 550 cord. I like Kevlar cord because you can obviously use it to cut through restraints and things like that.
Yep.
But below the waistline, and then you hook it with your thumb and pull it up past the shorts, and the string hangs on this, and then it's deployed, right? And it doesn't print, at all when it's carried in the crease of the hip.
Yep.
Other ways to deploy it instead of it, it's not always designed to be held like this either. Your baseline is you want your thumb free here, not shoved all the way unless you're actually going to hold something. But I can draw it with my middle finger, put it in the palm, and then I'm going to roll it out this way. So here, I don't need a guard to stop it from sliding. I'm using the thumb pad. The thumb pad rests here.
Yep.
There's also grips on the side, so I can punch straight with it now. So if I do a draw from this position here, I'm not going to have an arcing motion. It's coming straight out in the jugular notch or aiming low in the eye, and it's going to slide right in the crease of the eye. It's like a vaulting pole. If you ever pole vaulted, you had this pit, and it would slide right down in that pit. I've vaulted in junior high and high school, right? But as you slip that up in aim low, like even if you do an eye gouge, you flick the eyes, you keep your fingers slightly bent so they don't roll back, but I actually aim low so it will not miss when he flinches, and one will slip into the eye. Then you can add the heavy tools off the flinching or the reaction, because he's not going to be flinching as effectively after the eye poke,
Exactly.
But other tactics, I don't want to jump around too much, but those things all kind of blend together. And then the integration of that, we evolved into what's called the mini dagger here, which is the same thing, but it's a little bit shorter, right here. And then it's evolved into the rescue tool here, which fits into the same sheath here.
Yeah.
So the rescue tool here has a carbide tip. You got to make sure your glass breaker is something like carbide, because some people will have just a little pointy piece of metal, and you're going to look like a fool when you go up and break glass in front of everybody, and it's just bouncing off, Now you barely tap glass. Seatbelt cutter, oxygen wrench here. But out in my law enforcement course, which I'm so busy with SOCP and custom courses with the other federal agencies that I actually do. There's 3 federal agencies that I do their student cadre every year, from FBI HRT to the State Department and the Marshall SOG team instructors. So I have set times where I do that, and between maintaining 2-week instructor courses, I don't have that much to do, maybe 2 or 3 law enforcement courses. But in that, I train them to use the rescue tool.
Brilliant.
To give them formal training in that, because now you've given formal edge weapon training without formal edge weapon training.
Exactly.
Because they cannot have in there, I had dagger training, in SOCP, and it doesn't write very well in the US. And I'm sure you guys are the same way, but they can with this. It's less than lethal, will soften somebody up to create a scramble. Now, if they choose to carry something different, it doesn't have to be my tool. It can be anybody's tool. But they would have in their muscle memory the most effective thing. Pin that handgun down, scoop this out with your support hand, soften them up, push them off, and get that in and get ready to deal with his buddy. You don't have time enough just to play that game with him, because you don't know who's going to show up.
Exactly.
One of my proudest moments when we first rolled out with this with Benchmade, it was around, I first played around with this around 09 or 08, and then got linked up with Benchmade and made some of the first prototypes, with another guy who did this exact footprint for me. And I took it to another company. They did not want to design the sheath the way I wanted to. They inflated the price really high. I wanted it at a certain price mark that Benchmade wanted to do. So I said, hey, I'll help you sell this batch, and then I'm moving on to another company. And that's what I ended up doing. There was a little bit of bad blood with those guys, but they knew what the deal was. And then once I got the bench made, had some prototypes. One of the scenarios that we were running, and I was training some females for this course, and these females did a little bit of executive protection, and I would have these females for a couple hours, spread out over 6 months, And so when I got them, we would do exactly. They had a SOCP dagger and they had a pistol, and every time they'd show up, we'd teach them striking, some grappling, breaking contact. And I would take them on my combat cubes, and I'd either sit them down next to me, sit them facing away, or they'd lay down and they'd face the wall. And what we call SOCP circuits of love. In that circuit I created, they'd have to rotate to me for 3 minutes. So for that 3-minute period there with me, I would say lay, stand, sit, turn around. I would attack them. Their job was to kill me and then clear the area around them. And sometimes they were ugly, but over and over again, I would coach them. I would be pawing at their face like I'm slapping them. They'd be getting to their tools and creating that space. And eventually they got to be really good scrappers, really good mindset, because they would have to over and over again overcome me. Well, this one female, she was a former gymnast, 105 pounds soaking wet, really shy, the most timid one in the class. So I was more worried about her mindset than the other ones, And in this scenario, I'm in the impact suit, right? This is back when I actually did the role playing. So I was probably, it's 15 years ago. So I was in my 40s, right? I'm standing next to her, and I set up where she's in a hallway where she's really close to me, but she could look in and see her principal in there with another guy in an impact suit in a meeting. And then all of a sudden the principal gets attacked. I know she's starting to go in, and I've done this with grown with men, 220-pound men. I pin in the wall, and I say, hey, I'm going to decide when he's going to go in there and help. So I thought, okay, I'm going to pin her in the wall, and I'm going to make her wait another 30 seconds before she can go in there. So right when I pinned her, I saw she was transitioning to her handgun. So I pinned her handgun down, and I tried to block her left arm with my shoulder. But as soon as she hit the wall, she had already started going for the dagger and her pistol at the same time. So when I hit her, her elbow, her hand was on this side. And I told him, I said, hey, don't stab me in the head. You know what I mean? Even though, because some of our helmets, we have padding on there, she starts shanking me in the head with the trainer, right? And that trainer is really hard. Like this guy right here, right? He's got a nice leg. So she's just bam, bam. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I go to pin her, still pin this hand. I reached up to kind of block that. And we do what's called a double post. So she went from that double post, cleared the cloth, transitioned, and put like 3 sim rounds in my chest.
Awesome.
Right? I'm like, then she ran in there, pistol whipped the guy on top, dragged the principal out of there. And I was taking my helmet off. I thought I was going to need stitches. I was kind of in between where you get that kind of weird feeling like it's 50-50,
Yeah.
But on the inside, I'm like, yes, that was freaking awesome. I've been a black belt for 19 years. And at that time I was, still in my prime in my early 40s. And I was, 205 pounds. So I was freaking so happy that she pulled that off on me, because that's how I evaluate what I teach, because I'm going to try to mess you up. I know what you're going to do. I'm not going to cater to it. Can I screw you up and see what you're going to do? And then what do I need to make it work? So that was a big success moment for me there, is making these switches with these tools, because you can have the best tool, but can you get it out when you need it? You know what I mean? Inside of that struggle, can you not print it, But speed this up, talking about some of the other tools, some of the other evolutions of what we have is the folder.
Yeah, that folder
here.
I think you got to quote, every centimeter of this knife, there's a reason for
it. Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I didn't grab, I got the trainer right here. So here's the trainer. I actually stuck the other one. I thought I had it laying next to me, but I can show you on this trainer here. So it's 4.5 inches of D2 steel, and also designed the thickness here. If you put the clip, which I have, comes with 2 clips, right? A short one and a long one. I prefer the short clip at the hinge point for combative reasons, but also it will slide behind your molly as long as the clip is at the hinge point, right?
Yep.
And if you leave the clip at this end, this is too fat, slide behind all molly, unless it's a real loose. So you can actually run around this. Now, It has a carbide tip right here for breaking glass.
Brilliant.
And it has these dimples. So these dimples are reference points for your hand, because I will still stab here by using this part of my hand here. So it's thrusting this way. I'm not relying on a hilt, right? So I'm going to be here. Then I can move from a forward grip to a reverse grip. So then it can rotate in your hand off that back, and then it can rotate back forward here, right?
Yep.
It has an access lock, which is extremely strong, lightweight, super thin, as lightweight as we can make it and still keep the strength. So you could put in your jogging pants and go for a jog. The short clip is also there to hide behind your belt. So if you're going to church, you can tuck it in an appendix carry and blouse the top over and not be printing. Plus, it works as a good fist load. So you may scoop it out this way, hammer fist with this part, and then you're still can deploy it with it here. I may not even roll it over my hand, because if we're in the clinch, I may plunge it into your back and then use my back muscles to fillet open. And then when you have the opportunity, it can rotate smoothly and still maintain a good grip.
Yeah.
When I talk about the hinge point here, if you're just carrying it in your pocket and your tactics are more, hey, I'm just going to use it for whatever, and it's my primary weapon, then that's fine. But if you're going to carry it because you're going to have to do a cross draw, if the hinge is here, you're going to have to reach over and fumble with it a little bit more before you can actually deploy it with your support hand.
Yep.
But if you have it tipped down with the clip here, you can easily roll it right or left and deploy it easier with your support hand. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's task specific, right, on what your mission set may be. But if you're carrying on your kit, you still may have to utilize it that way, because you may be holding somebody off or pinning your weapon down, or you may be holding something that you have to cut that you don't want to let go of, and it's going to be more efficient to do it that way.
Exactly.
And know this, because when we would fight early on, before the SOCP dagger came around, when we would do a lot of our low vis training, I'd give one guy a spider color, and I would not pay attention to where the clip was, and they would fight in set positions, half guard or clinch. One guy would have the knife and the other wouldn't. And then you would tell the guy, you know, but whoever had the knife was in a leverage disadvantage position. You can go for the knife whenever you want to. The guy on top can't frisk you, because they would develop tactics. As soon as it started, you'd see guys doing Terry frisk inside of the fight, which we teach that as well. You know, you're clinch fighting a guy, and you have a moment, you might as well run your hand, or you may feel it on your form when you're hugging him, some sort of metal. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, my use of force is going to have to think about that. But only when they reach for it and touch it can you go for it. But you would see guys with been open up knives since they were little kids, and you'd see knives go skipping across the mat, because they were pulling out in some manner where they were having to readjust it in their hand, and then it would just fall out. So watching these scenarios is key, but scenarios is key for evaluating myself as an instructor. If that really athletic, smart guy does not do well in the scenario, whose fault is it? It's my fault.
Exactly.
And how do I evaluate myself? By how they do. Now I need to readjust how I deliver the information. Was the technique flawed? Did I deliver it wrong? Did I not spend enough time on it? You know, a lot of times people will show all the techniques the same. Like, we're going to spend 15 minutes on all these things. No, you need to dissect what that guy needs. 5 minutes on this, 20 minutes on this, 5 minutes on that, 10 minutes on that, based on the hierarchy of what you're seeing in the scenario, of what the sensitive guys messing up on the more important stuff. You know what I mean? And then you can dial in that POI, because even when I create SOCP instructors, each unit is different. They've got to know that they've got to adjust this. I'm going to give you your first and second grade most common answers that you will see as an assaulter or carrying a firearm. Master these basics and then start adding stuff on it. And then you can figure out what to do from there, and then figure out, you know, if you want to, we need to spend more time doing other fighting arts. But what I feel like we have defined is first and second grade for anybody that carries a firearm and any kind of assaulter. We have that baseline first and second grade, and then it's up to them to move past that. But my goal with the SOCP program is they will not fall below this level. Everybody will stay right here, not drop down to nothingness. And then if they want to rise and do more and more stuff, then go for it, you know. And that's where I can make the biggest difference in those programs. The next tool here, not to get at my last little thing, I don't know if a lot of guys have seen this, And then we talked about a knife. Well, this is a knife right here. This is the new SOCP fixed blade right here.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. It's almost the old school Commando Fairbairn Sykes.
It is 6.5 inches of V3 steel.
Yeah.
Super lightweight. Look, it's really thin, but super strong. The handle's really thin. It's meant to be lightweight, but you still see the dimples that I use to rotate here, right?
Yeah.
But it's super light. And the real thing is in the sheath. So with this sheath here, it has a metal lock and a clip on the back. So when you slide it in here, it clips.
Brilliant.
Your thumb will push it forward and then slide it out. Then you have a strap. If you want to take the strap on or off, you can unclip it from here. So it's jump rated too, so you can jump with it. Now, this piece here will weave through the molly, so when you snap it down, it won't flare out and get hung on things, either up or down. And then if you needed to deploy it here, you can engage it with either hand. If you want to carry it down here, you can use your finger to clip it here, or you can use your thumb. If you want to adjust the tolerance of this, you can still bend this and pull it back to make it not bite too tight. If you overdid it, you can unscrew it with one of the Phillips screwdrivers so guys can adjust on the fly and then readjust the tightness, or take this clip off if you want to just attach it, and it will run partly through all molly, and then this will strap it up at the top. Now, if you take this off, a lot of the SF guys are told, hey, you can carry any knife. They don't want them carrying a firearm. So then they can conceal this, but it's super lightweight. So you could have this tucked in appendix carry and have retention, right? And then you're coming out with, hey, this is a Crocodile Dundee knife, right? This is a knife, and it can, this one here sharpened on both sides, this to here, and that way, you can wand with it to cut stuff with it. And then also, it's not out yet, but I've got several designs. When we originally designed this, there's several holes in the top here and holes in the handle to attach bayonet attachments. So you can attach a clip here and here.
Yep.
And then I have some designs that will slide through these holes to fit on a rail system that goes all the way to the barrel if you wanted to fix a bayonet. And that's been in the works for a while, but this will roll out first. And I know a lot of people think, why would you need a bayonet? Things are always going in full circle, And then we have the trainer for it as well here. So we've got the red trainer here. So
nice.
This guy, yeah. So
is that a Benchmade as well? Is it? I can see the logo. It is a Benchmade, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Benchmade. The fixed blade's out. I don't know if the trainer's out quite yet, but it's coming. And so we're slowly working that. I'm talking to several companies. So if there's a company that's interested and that makes, forward rail guards and things like that, and they want to reach out to me, let me know. I've got permission with Benchmade to work with companies that they get along with for that attachment. But it's primarily the knife's 100% made in the U.S. and the company I'm going to work with is going to be made in the U.S. and that way I can easier for me to get the government NSN numbers.
Yeah.
So we currently have NSN numbers on my Mini, my folder, and the SOCP bagger and a SOCP bagger combo, and the rescue tool. So there's 6 government NSN numbers on those tools right now. So it's doing pretty well. I've got so many other designs, but I have to pick and choose what Benchmade want the direction they want to go.
I tell you what,
they've been great to work with. I can't thank them enough for what they do with the knives and how they help me out.
Yeah, I came across Benchmade first in the unit. They have the Nimravis as the fixed blade knife for us. And when I left, I went to the guys that do the, I won't say what it is. I don't want to say that part of the unit, but they get the gear for the guys. And for leaving, I got a Benchmade.
Yeah.
And it's just a little mini barrage. But I carried this as a police officer here in Western Australia, and I actually had to use it to cut through a chain link fence. We're chasing a gunman, and chain link fence, obviously you can't, you just separate the 2 fence posts, but they have the shade guard or whatever you call it, the dust guard. I had to slice through that in one hit, and it was done. It was great. And then I carried as well the folder in the fire brigade, and had to use it to cut through an airbag one day. When you're cutting, is important that thing doesn't go off, so I cut through that. So I used it for a couple of great things. But you brought up a really good point there. When I was in the unit with my body armor and so on, I had to carry the Gerber, which was your combat dagger. But also the problem was the folder, because you need a knife to do things. You talked about Spyderco, there was a classic one. But what clever design you've got with the other folder you've invented there, because it can fit on the molly. I had mine in a little pouch that was, if you did that under duress or under speed, it's going to go absolutely haywire. You talked about those knives rolling across the floor. What you've invented there is operator specific so much, all the little things, down to what you said there with the Phillips head screws, because we're out there. I haven't got my little torque, I think they're called torque heads. What a clever idea. And it's probably the epitome of what you do, Greg, is reverse engineering it from an operator mindset, from a you need to have this happen. What can I do to make that happen? Which is absolutely beautiful thing.
A lot of what people make the mistake with designs is they see just the knife, or they see just that. They don't think about the interaction between the human body and the way you're going to carry it, the way you're going to store it, what's going to happen to it. Run it through its paces, live with it on it, and talk to people and get feedback. That's part of with the Phillips screwdriver. But you see people, even with the SOCP dagger here, where I've had guys that say, when the dagger first came out, they're like, oh, what is that? A throwing knife? They thought that it was a throwing knife. They're like, oh, look at this thing here, And I'm like, no, it's I'm using it for these things. And they kind of scratch their head, but it's only when they saw it in application that it clicked. I could not explain it to them. And then when they saw it, they go, oh, I get it now, right? And then some guys would want to shorten the sheath. They're like, oh, Greg, well, with the sheath right here, you can grab your whole hand on it. I'm like, well, that defeats the whole purpose now, because now it's going to get hung on everything. And not only worse than a regular knife, you got this that really captures stuff. And it's easier for somebody to grab. But you know what? I don't argue with them. Like, hey, if that's what you want to do, because there's so many competitors out there. That's why I say if you really think about it, back in 2009, when I designed this, you did not see ring knives. If you saw a ring knife, it was a karambit, it was curved, and everybody's like, okay, and then it was real bulky on a kit. But for a dagger type knife with a skeletonized handle, to have a ring on it, then it was even stranger. But now it becomes everybody sees that because of, and we were the first with SOCP did it. Push that knife out there, and I'm flattered when I see people copying. I'm like, okay, that guy's trying to do it, but he's not understanding the real outcome. He's checking that cool ring on the end box, but they're not doing it the right way. And what's funny now, there's knockoffs even in China that actually have Benchmade and my name on it, and SOCP being pushed out all over the place. And they slowly make it to the US, but it's really bad in Europe and other places like that. I've been instructors with the European Union anti-terrorist team and some other guys. And they're like, yeah, Greg, we started to get them, but they were, it's a great price, but then we realized it wasn't your knife.
Oh, no.
And then what's cool is some of these instructors told the guy ordered said, send them back. We're not going to support this, and it was really cool. But, it's kind of cool that it is flattery, that they're copying, your concepts and stuff like that. But it is a little bit
because it works
on the financial side, and people don't understand the history of that variation, of a knife and what it was designed to be used for, and the whole interaction of everything. But I enjoy that design process. I start thinking about stuff, and it just, some people like basket weave, and I like to sit there and think everything through. And even with the scenarios that we run, and even, some of the other products that we have, from impact suits to helmets to bags, I'm going with Vertex and the sling bag and the fanny pack and all these things, which I don't know we have time to show. I know we've been talking
I'm gonna wrap it up, but what in the show notes, I really go through things. I think that's what sets a show apart from a lot of others as well. All the things you've invented, we'll be going through those at the start, But it really does bring us to the point where I'd ask, and again, it's at the start of the show in the intro, where is the best place for people to find you? What is your website? What is the socials, just for people to learn more that aren't in Fort Bragg and in those places?
I've got to update my website, so it's a little dated, but it's SOCP.info, and
Awesome.
that's the website. And it's I don't do civilian courses at this point. I do a law enforcement courses and work with federal agencies, and then it'd be great to have some guys from your neck of the woods to come over and jump in some SOCP courses, travel over, and then bring the knowledge back. And then I've got a SOCP gear, SOCP gear, where we sell the combat cubes and some of the suits that we've made a lot of changes. I've got to update that website. And then I started this, got on this new thing called Instagram a couple years ago, and it's SOCP underscore solutions, SOCP underscore solutions. And I don't show a lot of stuff on there. I as far as too many techniques, I kind of guide some products and some other things like that. There's a lot of people showing, so much stuff on their Instagram, and I'm not big on doing that. There's some guys are showing good stuff. There's some bad stuff out there, so I have to be careful for. But for me, out of respect for the units that I work with, I don't want to put certain things out. And also we've solved a lot of problems that some people have evolved into and some people haven't. I don't want to throw all those things out because, you never know who will be fighting next. You know what I mean? And why I don't benefit by having a few extra followers. I don't, I do care and I don't care because I'm not here to gain followers, you know what I mean? But I do like sharing, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, to followers. Not that I don't like having a bunch of people, and it's kind of cool to say, hey, look, I've got 6,000 followers on Instagram. Cool. It's not going to affect my business because I'm kind of booked up with who I'm with, but it's
No, look, you're a born teacher. Clearly, before we hit record, we're talking about so many of the guests on this show. We're there to help others. We're there to transfer knowledge. And if one thing somebody hears in this show can help them, then we sort of done our job. And you've also been very clever there, showing that you're not going to teach these things to everybody, because when it's out there in the public arena, no different than the how not to die stuff that I put out there. I'm not teaching people how to chop throats and leg stamp and other things. I'll teach them how to look at their phone in a safe way. That keeps everybody safe. It's not something that can be used against you. That's something that's going to benefit everybody in the world and keep them safe. Look, Greg, it's been an honor. It really has. Speaking to you, you're a world of knowledge. I'll split this one into two parts. Like I said, we'll do the start with your background, and then moving on to mindset, and then your amazing creations. And I don't say that lightly. As how I found out about you years ago. Look, it's just been brilliant speaking with someone that teaches Special Forces guys and has done so for over 2 decades now. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time. Thank you for coming on the show. And more importantly, thank you for what you do.
Well, I want to hey, thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor to be on your show, and thank you for what you've done and things that you've accomplished. I'm humble around guys like yourself and the operators that I teach, because I'm not an operator. I've never been an operator. I'm the coach on the sidelines, and I've watched a bunch of feedback, and I'm a super armchair quarterback that can kind of guide guys, in certain different directions. And on the jiu-jitsu side, I may be, at a high level there, and some of the MMA side, but when it comes to integration of tactics and things like that, I'm a constant student from guys like yourself. So thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Greg. I'll hit pause. We have a quick chat, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, high performance living coach from hownotodie.com.au. And you can listen to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by realketonesaustralia.com, the best and most effective ketone supplement on the market. to reduce anxiety, enhance brain performance, and supply twice as much energy as glucose. Thanks for watching.